Sabine Hosenfeld made a video called Capitalism is Good, Let Me Explain. Well, that's an appropriately defensive attitude to take with a title like that. Hold on now. Put your pitchforks down. Now is not a good time to be pro-capitalism in terms of, like, the public discourse. Yeah, you guys remember her? I remember her. It seems like she gets in trouble whenever she talks about a subject that isn't science.
Before we talk about capitalism and markets and stuff, we need to talk about money. I don't mean my money, though while we're at it, check out my Patreon. I mean money in general. What do we even need money for? She gives you some of her money so that you can buy your juice press. You just have to agree that if you get rich with your juice press, you give her the money back, plus something on top. That money which Sue gives to you is your capital. And such was born the capitalist. The capitalist is a person or institution who provides capital to those who want to launch a new business.
No, that would be an investor. Capitalism is a whole economic system, and capital... well, the money that was provided in that investment would be capital, yes, but that's not how... Okay.
Someone who's able and willing to take the risk that this capital will never have a return on investment.
No? Oh, God, the ideology right off the bat. A capitalist is someone willing to take the risk? No. Again, you're thinking of an investor, and there are plenty of other professions that are more risky than being an investor, such as in the 1800s, all professions. The idea that, like, the investor is the only one who takes the risk, and not say, like, everyone involved in the economy, like, people can lose their jobs or get downsized or whatever, like, is capitalist realism 101. Also, capitalists hate risk. Look at, like, the shit Marvel produces. Like, it's the moment they have a formula down.
Capitalism and all the elaborate financial instruments that come with it is a surprisingly recent innovation. It didn't really take off until the Industrial Revolution 150 years ago, and it's dramatic.
It's also worth knowing that, like all other gigantic economic or political paradigms, there's no hard line where you cross into capitalism. Much in the same way that, like, America isn't a perfect free market because, like, the post office is run by the government or whatever. Like, there's no, like, single point where something becomes another thing. Much in the same way that, like, you know, democracy existed in some form back in Athens, or you could argue, like, you know, the monarchy exists today in the form of, like, the European nobility, like the royal families. But it's not like the UK is, like, a monarchy. Like, if you describe, oh, what's the UK? Oh, it's a monarchy. Well, no, it's a parliamentary democracy that has a monarchy, you know. It's much the same with capitalism, you know. Capitalism, is, at least in the Marxian sense, is mostly about the class distinction. It's mostly about the relationship between the proletariat and the bourgeoisie as distinguished from the feudal relationship between lord and serf. And that was like a kind of like a procedural thing. Like, or like it took a while to shift over.
Scientists tend to associate the stunning societal progress we've seen since then to science and technology. But I think that's having it backwards. The driver of all this progress was the capitalist system that allowed an efficient allocation of resources. By resources...
There's so much wrong with this. The reason technology exploded the way that it did was because of the Industrial Revolution. A huge part of how advanced a society is really just comes down to how much energy there is. Once we started putting steam engines everywhere, our ability to make new shit exponentially increased. That would probably still have happened, even if we were still locked in a feudal state of affairs. I mean, like, for example, you could actually see this transition happening pretty clearly in England, one of the earliest countries in the world to have an industrial revolution, and at the time, while they did have a parliament, it was a monarchy where the monarch had real power, and what's more, like, they had, like, a kind of, like, lord-serf relationship going on over there, though it was more complicated. English history is so complicated, such an old country. But what you saw, essentially, is that the mode shift from feudalism to capitalism was described primarily by who had the wealth and who had the resources to use the labor of the proletariat. Whereas the lords used the pretext of their land ownership, the capitalists used the pretext of their factory ownership. And the nature of the relationship changed. because lords owned large swaths of land that the serfs lived on, the relationship there was one of the farmer. You live on the land and you provide a portion of what you raise to the lord, and that's the deal. Whereas with the capitalist, you don't have a bunch of people living in factories, but you have people living around factories. So rather than people living on the land, you have people visit the land or the factory for a portion of their day, back then like 12 to 14 hours a day, because life fucking sucked back then. And factories are a much, 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 much more efficient way of producing things than farms are, and they can use resources produced by farms like cotton or linen in order to produce new things that are more expensive. And then the capitalist who owns those things, because of law, because of bad laws, can sell those things for enormous profits. The argument that Marx makes is that the fundamental relationship is not changing here. That you have the feudal lord and the serf, and you have the capitalist and the worker. But fundamentally, the basic dynamic is about the same. You use different laws, different legal pretexts, and different arrangements, but the goal is always the same: to find a way to legitimize the exploitation of the labor of the proletariat. Does that make sense to everyone?
Capitalism is a system that distributes these resources without anyone needing to have an overview.
Fucking excuse me? What? Wait, is this like actual invisible hand of the free market? Like there are no choices made in the distribution of resources? There are no like material failures or like it's just all okay. If she's arguing that basic supply and demand laws dictated material distribution to the point that there was no human involvement in it, supply and demand has been a thing for thousands of years. That is not a capitalist thing. That's just a law of economics. Like, supply demand raising or lowering the price of goods was a thing back in like the Assyrian Empire or what. Like that's not new. That's an uncharitable interpretation of what she's saying. I don't know. I'm sorry. Without human no. Nah.
Capitalism got a pretty bad rep when Marx claimed.
Yeah, that's true, man. When all those people were working 14-hour days, sending their children to coal mines and dying of black lung, everyone was totally fine with capitalism until this one guy, he was this real rabble-rouser. Guys, I wonder why, like, radical socialist militancy took root in basically everywhere in the world all at once. It must have been because everyone was fine with capitalism before him,
Capitalism has been enormously successful in unlocking societal progress. And the nations who still don't use it, such as North Korea, Cuba, and Laos, are places you don't want to live.
Cuba is fine? Wait, hold on. Cuba's fine? Like, it's not great, but considering the sanctions that have been placed on them and all the hardship, they've actually done remarkably well. Like, North Korea's problems... Wait, does she think the problem with North Korea is that they're not capitalist? Like, I would argue they're state capitalist, but don't mind me. Like, that's what's going on over there? Like, they just haven't done capitalism? Are we to argue, like, is Turkmenistan not capital? Like, yeah. Just, like, again, capitalist realism. Attribute literally all human good to capitalism.
We've seen that capitalism is a system that combines markets with governing rules to efficiently distribute resources.
No! Markets and rules have both existed for as long as human civilization have existed. Law and markets are pre-civilization things. Even tribes had markets and laws, though they wouldn't have called them laws. They would have just said rules, but you've called them rules.
This distribution of resources works best if everyone can put forward their offers freely and customers can pick what they want. This is known as a free market, and it optimizes the distribution of resources.
Jesus Christ.
By competition. Free markets are a beautiful example of decentralized self-organization, an invisible hand as...
Oh my... Bro, whoa. I figured she would just be a liberal. This is like actual unironic, like high school me level misunderstanding of libertarianism. Holy shit.
Free markets also don't automatically account for externalities, such as environmental pollution. An externality is generally any consequence of trade that doesn't directly affect the trading parties. They can be both good and bad, but it's the bad ones that are the problem. Suppose there's
Now, hypothetically, and follow through with me here on this weird example. What if, in a system where the businesses are owned by wealthy people who made that wealth from their businesses, they use that wealth to buy and control media and lobby politicians to make them sympathetic to their interests? Then you have a situation where even though coal and oil executives represent an infinitesimally small fraction of the American population, hypothetically, they would have a ridiculously outsized influence on U.S. policy, up to and including outright threatening to not build new facilities or shut down existing facilities in states that contain senators or congresspeople who won't vote for them or vote for their interests. Just hypothetically, what if we've set up a system where we're supposed to put rules on these people, but they're the ones with the power to make the rules? Couldn't happen? Interesting hypothetical. Yeah, I wonder if some... Yeah, sorry. Interesting hypothetical.
a river going by your house that everyone is free to use. One day a clothing company puts up a factory and dumps their toxic waste into the river. Or the fish die and no one dares swimming in the river anymore. This is clearly not an optimal use of resources, you might say. Why didn't Smith's invisible hand prevent it? The reason market forces didn't prevent it is that the water was free to use. The market didn't know it had any value, so pollution couldn't reduce its value.
What? The water had value, but the factory polluting in it saw the river's value as a dumping site. What is that? What? Are you suggesting the solution to river pollution is to like charge river water by the gallon? What are you suggesting? You can't fix pollution by people. You can charge for river water when it's entered into when it's bottled or when it's entered into our water mains. What do you mean? What does that even mean? You could fix the pollution by making the water cost money? It wouldn't matter to the polluters. They're not selling water. They're selling whatever their factory is making waste producing. What does this mean?
There are several ways to deal with problems like this. One is to just pass laws that forbid certain actions and punish those who disobey.
Wow, wouldn't that be fucking cool? Awesome. Wait, cool. We did it in one. Hell yeah. If you're a factory, if you're a company and you run a factory and the factory dumps in the river, yeah, you should go to jail for a really fucking long time. I agree, yeah. That's not something you can do by accident. Like, whenever you hear about a factory polluting a river, people think like, oh, it's one toxic barrel. It's usually like thousands of gallons of waste.
Or you can put a tax on the pollution so that at least...
No. Do not let corporations kill the environment, like, on a dime. Like, oh, sorry, your family built near this river and it's been a part of your family for generations and it's beautiful and every day you wake up to the sunrise glistening over the river's edge and now it's all waste and polluted and smells like shit and there's plastic bubbling to the surface. Don't worry, okay? We've charged the corporation a little bit more money.
At least the government has money to clear up the mess. Or...
Government clear up the mess. Yeah, sure. Also, why would the government clear up the mess if it's not a crime? If you're just like putting a fine on pollution, why would is it like a tax or a fine? Like, are we cleaning it? Shouldn't they clean it?
You can put a price on using the water. There are pros and cons to all of those, but that's a different story.
No, just arrest them. Just arrest them. Throw them in jail forever.
Products whose production causes damage to the environment, which then requires adaptation and mitigation, should be more expensive, not less expensive. This is why economists have argued for decades that we need to put a price on carbon, and it's why several countries have now introduced carbon taxes or...
She's literally like reconciling with the fact that capitalism incentivizes bad behavior, and she's like, well, that's not right. Someone should fix that. And then there's this guy called Karl Marx who wrote about all this 150 fucking years ago. Like, literally, she's like, yeah, this doesn't make any sense. Why has nobody thought... Notice how she's not talking about, like, hey, very, very wealthy, powerful, intelligent people control the decisions that go through our nation. Why are all of these countries just settling on this weird, irrational set of policy preferences that somehow benefit the bourgeoisie? She's not asking herself that because she, like a classic liberal, this is the liberal brain rot that I've talked about so many times, literally incapable of systemic thinking, not capable of it. Everything is individual, everything is interpersonal. there's no like acknowledgement of why are all these really, like, ask, why are all these inefficiencies happening? Like, we were talking earlier about how capitalism is so smart and so wise and it works so well. So why are all these obviously socially detrimental behaviors being incentivized? Could it be that capitalism innately privileges and prioritizes the views and interests of a specific group of people with different interests to us?
Our sponsor Brilliant can help you.
Nope. Man, that was pretty bad. You know, credit where credit's due, at least to our audience. There are plenty of dislikes in this video, and I wouldn't necessarily believe that a science-oriented community would be, like, hardcore socialist or whatever, but...